Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance HOA Karen stories. In this Ripestories video, imagine your HOA trying to seize your property for fake violations, only then to accidentally expose that they have been forging documents and stealing land for years. The deeper I dug, the crazier it got. Here is how I took this homeowner association apart step by step. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled r/Ask Reddit, what is your pettiest HOA revenge? So about 20 years ago the land next to my farm was developed, and as soon as the developer turned the subdivision over to the HOA, I started having problems. They complained about the farm activity and sent a letter demanding I cease any farming activities, and the land has been actively farmed by my family since 1883. So I made sure they got the full experience by spraying liquid manure on the adjacent fields for 2 years straight. A few years late, they objected to trucks using their roads to access that part of the farm. I have a deeded access easement and I signed a binding agreement that allowed encroaching development as long as I retain unrestricted access to my farm through their roads. When they didn't take my lawyer seriously, we filed to have 22 homes removed from the easement. They refused to back down, and the court sided with me, giving them 90 days to remove the homes that encroached on my easement. They were happy to renew our prior access agreement, and I sent letters to the HOA members when they F up and cost the members money. This usually results in the board moving, and at one point that HOA was spending 30% of all dues paying a judgment I had against them, and that was after I reduced it to legal fees only. I have 2 other HOAs next to my farm property, and I've never had problems with them. The developments are much smaller though, and I think that is the big difference here. And the next one is a fantastic Malicious Compliance HOA story, which is titled HOA tried to seize my land and dared me to fight them, so I maliciously complied. So this happened a few years back when my wife and I bought our first house. We were so excited to finally own our own place after years of renting apartments. The house was perfect, 3 bedrooms, nice yard, quiet neighborhood. What we didn't realize was that we were about to enter a war zone with the most power-hungry HOA board I've ever encountered. Everything started normal enough. We got the usual welcome info about trash pickup, community rules, that sort of thing, you know. The HOA fees seemed reasonable at around $60 a month, and the neighborhood looked well maintained. We figured we would keep our heads down, follow the rules, and live peacefully. That lasted about 3 months. The first sign of trouble came when I decided to plant some roses along our front fence line. I'd always wanted a nice garden, and my wife loves flowers, so I spent a weekend preparing the soil and planting about a dozen rose bushes. They looked beautiful, and several neighbors complimented us on how nice they made the front of our house look. 2 weeks later, I got a message from the HOA. The notice informed us that we had planted landscaping without prior approval and were in violation of the community guidelines. We apparently had 10 days to remove the roses or face daily fines of $50. I was actually confused because I had read through all the HOA documents before we bought the house, and I did not remember seeing anything about needing approval for basic landscaping. I dug out our copy of the community guidelines, and sure enough, that section of the bylaws did not say anything against my roses. The landscaping section only mentioned needing approval for major changes like trees over 6 feet tall or hardscape features. My wife suggested we just go talk to them and clear up the misunderstanding, so I called the number on the notice and asked to speak with the president of the Architectural Review Committee. The woman who answered was incredibly rude right off the bat. She told me that ignorance of the rules was not an excuse and that we should have known better than to purchase a house in an HOA. Never mind, that's not what it says. Better than to make changes without permission. And when I pointed out that the section number she had cited didn't even exist, she got more hostile. "Are you calling me a liar?" she snapped, and I explained that I was just trying to understand which rule we had supposedly broken, since the section she had referred did not match anything in our copy of the guidelines. "Well, maybe your copy is outdated. The rules change all the time. You need to stay current." This seemed odd, since we had only lived there 3 months and had received the guidelines when we closed on the house. But I figured maybe there had been an update that we had missed, so I asked how to get the current version.
You should have gotten updates in the mail. If you didn't, that's your problem. The roses need to go.
I asked if I could at least see the current guidelines so I could understand what we had done wrong and avoid future violations, and she told me I could request copies for a $25 processing fee and they'd be mailed to me within 2 weeks, and this was getting ridiculous. I was being fined for violating a rule that didn't even exist in any documentation I had, and now they wanted to charge me to see the supposed rule I had broken. My wife and I decided to just remove the roses to avoid the hassle really. It was not worth $50 a day in fines over some flowers, but that was apparently just the beginning. Over the next 6 months we received violation notices for increasingly petty things. Each violation came with the same pattern, references to section of guidelines that didn't even exist in any documentation we had, demands for immediate compliance, and threats of daily fines. Each time we tried to get clarification or see the actual rules we were supposedly breaking, we got the same runaround about outdated documents and processing fees. We paid for updated guidelines 3 different times and kept getting the exact same documents we already had. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning in early fall. I was in the backyard raking leaves when I heard voices coming from our side yard. I walked around to see what was going on there and found 3 people standing in our yard with clipboards and measuring tapes. One of them was the woman I'd spoken to on the phone, let's just call her the HOA president. The other 2 appeared to be her assistants or board members. "Excuse me," I said, "can I help you with something?" The president looked up with this smug expression.
We are conducting a property boundary verification. We've received complaints about encroachments.
Encroachments? What encroachments? She gestured towards our back fence and said,
Your fence line extends beyond your property boundary into HOA common area. You will need to move it back at least 6 feet.
I stared at her like she had grown a second head. That fence has been there since before we bought the house. It was here when we did the inspection and it's shown on our property survey.
Well, your survey is wrong. Our measurements show clear encroachment onto our common areas.
Now I was getting mad. Bad enough that they'd been harassing us with bogus violations for months, but now they were claiming part of our yard was not even ours. Show me the survey that you're using, I said.
We don't have to show you anything. We are the HOA board and we are telling you there's an encroachment. You have 30 days to move your fence back to the correct property line or face fines of $100 per day.
One of her assistants handed me an official notice that basically repeated what she had just said. According to this document, our rear fence encroached on HOA-managed common space and had to be relocated to comply with community property boundaries as established in the so-called Master Development Plan. Well, I want to see this Master Development Plan, I said.
You can request a copy for a $50 processing fee.
$50? You were charging $25 before.
Fees have increased due to administrative costs.
Well, at this point, my wife had come outside to see what was going on. When I explained the situation, she got just as angry as I was. This is ridiculous. We have a legal survey from when we bought the house. How can you just decide our fence is in the wrong place? The president gave her this condescending look.
Honey, legal surveys can have errors. What matters is the official HOA boundary map, which clearly shows the correct property lines.
The way she said honey made my wife's face go red. I could tell she was about to lose it, so I stepped in. Fine, we will get our own surveyor out here to verify the boundaries. If our fence really is in the wrong place, we will just move it. But if it isn't, you need to back off and leave us alone. The president laughed.
Go ahead and waste your money. I dare you. We are in the right here. We know where the boundaries are. And just so we are clear, if you don't comply within 30 days, the daily fines start, and we will also pursue legal action to force compliance. This is not negotiable.
Are you threatening us? My wife asked.
Well, I'm informing you of the consequences of non-compliance with HOA regulations.
And yeah guys, I gotta say, in my book, that definitely sounds like intimidation and a threat. So I'm curious, if you would have been in this awful situation, what would you have done with this HOA Karen? I mean, anything other than throwing her in the trash can where she belongs. I mean, would you have contacted the police or a lawyer? Let me know what you would have done in the comments, and while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment if you want to help me with the YouTube algorithm. And now let's continue with the story.
You agreed to follow these rules when you bought your house.
I was done playing games. You know what, Karen? Bring it on. If you're so confident about these boundaries, let's settle this properly. I'll get my own survey done and we will see whose is right. The president actually smirked at that.
Oh, you wanna fight this, huh? Really? Do you have any idea how much legal battles cost? We have insurance and lawyers on retainer. You will spend more on legal fees than it would cost to just move your fence.
Maybe, but at least I will know the truth.
The truth is whatever the HOA board says. It is. We govern this community, and if you don't like it, you can just sell your house and move somewhere else.
That did it for me. The arrogance in her voice, the way she acted like she owned the neighborhood, like we were just peasants for her who should be grateful that she allowed us to live there. I was furious, but I kept my voice calm. You know what? You are absolutely right. Let's fight this properly.
Well, I dare you to take us to court over this.
Let's get a judge involved and settle this boundary question once and for all. Her smirk got even wider.
Careful what you wish for. We have never lost a boundary dispute ever, but if you want to waste your money and time, be my guest. Just remember, when you lose, you will owe our legal costs too.
Fine by me, let's do this. After they left, my wife and I sat down to figure out the next steps. We were both angry, but we were also smart enough to know that we needed professional help, so I called the surveyor who had done our original property survey and explained the situation. He seemed actually genuinely puzzled. "I've never heard of boundary disputes in the neighborhood," he said. "The property lines were pretty clearly established when the development was built, but sure, I can come out and re-verify everything." He came out the following Tuesday and spent about 3 hours taking measurements and checking his equipment against the original survey markers. When he was done, he showed me his findings. "Your fence is exactly where it should be," he said. "Actually, it's about 2 inches inside your property line, so if anything, you're not using all the land you own." I have no idea what these HOA people are talking about. I asked him to put his findings in writing, which he did. I also asked if he could research the original development plans to see if there was any mention of the area behind our fence being designated as common space, and he said he would look into it. Well, a week later he called me back with some interesting news. "I pulled all the original development records from the county," he said. "There's no mention anywhere of HOA common space in that area, and according to every document I can find, that's all private property belonging to individual homeowners." This was getting stranger by the minute. Not only was our fence in the right place, but the land they claimed was HOA common area actually belonged to us and our neighbors. I decided to dig a bit deeper. I requested copies of all the original HOA formation documents from the county recorder's office, and what I found was eye-opening. The HOA had been established when the neighborhood was built, but the boundaries described in the original documents were completely different from what the current board was claiming. According to the founding documents, the HOA's authority extended only to the streets, sidewalks, and a small community mailbox area, and all the land behind the houses was actually clearly designated as private property. Even more interesting though, the original HOA documents included a detailed map showing exactly which areas were under HOA control and which were private property. The map clearly showed that the area behind our fence and behind all the houses on our street was private property, so where was the current board getting their boundary claims? Well, I decided to find out. I submitted a formal request to the HOA board for copies of all current governing documents, including the boundary map they were using to make their encroachment claims, and according to state law, HOAs are required to provide these documents to homeowners within 30 days. 30 days came and went, but there were no documents, so I sent a follow-up letter, this time certified mail, again requesting the documents and noting that they were past the legal deadline for providing them, and another 2 weeks passed. But there was still nothing, and finally I got a response. It was a letter from an attorney claiming to represent the HOA. The letter stated that the documents I'd requested contained proprietary information and could not be released without a court order. This was of course complete nonsense. HOA governing documents are not proprietary information. They are legal documents that homeowners have an absolute right to see. But it told me something important. They were stalling because they didn't want me to see whatever documents they were using. Around this time, something else happened that made the whole situation even more interesting. I was talking to my next-door neighbor about the boundary dispute, and he mentioned that he'd received a similar violation notice about his fence a few months earlier. Really? What did you do about it? I just paid the fine and moved my fence back. It was easier than fighting them. How much land did you have to give up? About 4 feet along the back of my property. It was annoying, but I did not want the hassle. I asked if he still had the violation notice, and he dug it up for me. Sure enough, it claimed that his fence was encroaching on HOA common area and referenced the same mysterious master development plan that had been mentioned in our notice as well. So I started knocking on doors, talking to other neighbors. It turned out that over the past 2 years, at least 8 households had received similar violation notices. Some had fought back and eventually just given up when the legal costs got too high. Others had paid fines and moved their fences rather than deal with the stress. In every case, the HOA had claimed the homeowner was encroaching on common area that needed to be maintained for community use, but when I asked what this community use was, nobody could tell me. The land behind the houses was just sitting there unused. No community gardens, no playgrounds, no walking paths, just empty grass that the HOA claimed to maintain, but that I'd never seen anyone actually maintaining. This was starting to look like a pattern of the HOA board systematically seizing private property from homeowners. But why? And how were they getting away with it? So I decided to investigate all of this further. I went back to the county recorder's office and requested copies of all property transactions and boundary changes in our neighborhood over the past 5 years. What I found was shocking. The HOA had been quietly filing paperwork to change the official property boundaries. They would send violation notices to homeowners, and when people either paid fines or moved their fences, the board would file legal documents claiming the disputed area as HOA common property. Over time, they had accumulated several acres of land that originally belonged to individual homeowners, but here's where it got really interesting. I found records showing that the HOA board had been selling some of this common area to developers, small parcels here and there, nothing big enough to attract attention, but enough to generate significant revenue for the HOA, or more accurately, for the board members personally. I also discovered that the current HOA president owned a property management company, and several of the common area parcels had been sold to companies that she had financial interests in. This was not just harassment or power tripping, this was fraud. The HOA board was systematically stealing property from homeowners and selling it for personal profit. I took all my research to an attorney who specialized in property law and HOA disputes, and after reviewing everything, he was amazed. "I've never seen anything quite like this," he said. "They have basically created a fictional boundary map and have been using it to steal property for years. The original HOA documents are completely clear about the actual boundaries, so what can we do about it?" "Well, we can definitely fight your specific boundary dispute, but given what you have found, I think we should go bigger. This affects multiple homeowners who've had their property taken. We could file a class action suit to recover all the stolen land. How strong is our case?" "It's actually very strong. The original HOA documents, the county records, the survey data, it all supports your position. The board has been operating completely outside their legal authority, and I was excited but also nervous. Taking on the HOA board in court would be expensive and time-consuming. But then I remembered what the president had said to me that day in my yard. "Do you have any idea how much legal battles cost? You would spend more on legal fees than it would cost to just move your fence." So yeah, the HOA president had dared me to fight this. She was so confident in her position that she actually taunted me about it. And well, I was about to maliciously comply with her dare in a way she never expected. So we filed the lawsuit against the HOA. We were not just challenging the HOA boundary dispute, we were challenging the HOA board's entire authority to seize private property and demand that all illegally taken land be returned to its rightful owners. The response from the HOA board was swift and predictable. They hired an expensive law firm and filed a motion to dismiss our case, claiming we had no standing to challenge their authority. They also sent violation notices to several of the homeowners who had joined the lawsuit, clearly trying to intimidate people into dropping out, but then something beautiful happened. My attorney had done his homework on the original HOA formation documents, and he discovered something that changed everything. The current HOA board had been operating under a completely invalid legal structure for over 3 years. Here's what happened. When the neighborhood was originally built, the HOA was established with a 7-member board. According to the original bylaws, board positions had specific term limits, and new elections were supposed to be held every 2 years. The bylaws also specified exactly how many homeowners needed to be present for a valid election, and what percentage of votes were needed to change the governing documents, but the current board had been ignoring all of these requirements.
They had been re-electing themselves in meetings where only board members were present, and they had changed the bylaws without meeting the voting requirements. They had even expanded their own authority to include powers that were never granted in the original HOA formation documents. So in essence, the current board had no legal authority to govern the HOA at all, and every decision they made, every violation notice they had issued, every boundary change they had filed was legally invalid. My attorney filed an amended complaint that didn't just challenge the boundary disputes, it challenged the legitimacy of the entire current HOA board and demanded that all of their actions over the past 3 years be voided, and the HOA's expensive lawyers tried to argue that the procedural violations were minor technicalities and that the board's actions should still be considered valid. But the judge was not buying it. He made it clear that he took HOA governing procedures very seriously. If homeowners are going to be subject to HOA authority, he said, then that authority must be exercised according to the legal requirements. You cannot just ignore the bylaws when they become inconvenient. The HOA lawyers tried to argue that the homeowners had waived their right to challenge the board's authority by not objecting sooner. But well, the judge shut that down too. How could they object when they were not informed of board elections that never actually happened? How could they challenge bylaw changes they were never told about? It became clear pretty quickly that the HOA board was in serious legal trouble here. However, they still tried to fight it, probably because they realized how much money they would have to pay back if they lost this. We found out that the board had been selling common area land and pocketing the proceeds. Basically, the HOA president personally had made over $150,000 from these sales over the past 3 years, and we also found records showing that the board had been charging homeowners for common area maintenance on land that was actually private property. Hundreds of homeowners had been paying monthly fees for the HOA to maintain land that did not belong to the HOA at all, but the most damning evidence was a series of emails between board members discussing their strategy. In these emails, they openly discussed how to maximize revenue opportunities from boundary disputes and joked about homeowners being too lazy or scared to fight back. One email from the president was particularly telling: "These people just want to be left alone. They'll pay a fine or move a fence rather than deal with legal hassles. It's easy money." Another email discussed targeting newer residents because they were less likely to know the original neighborhood boundaries and more likely to assume the board was acting legitimately. When these emails came out, the HOA's legal team basically gave up trying to defend the board's actions and started focusing on damage control, and the case never went to trial. Faced with overwhelming evidence of fraud and the prospect of individual board members being held personally liable, the HOA agreed to a settlement. All illegally seized property was returned to rightful homeowners, all fines and fees collected through invalid violation notices were refunded with interest, and the HOA board president and 2 other board members were required to pay back all money they had personally received from illegal land sales plus penalties. But the best part was what happened to the HOA itself, because the board has been operating illegally for so long and because they had violated their fiduciary duty so egregiously, the HOA was to be dissolved entirely. The neighborhood would no longer be subject to HOA authority at all. This meant no more monthly fees, no more violation notices, no more architectural review committees and all that nonsense. Homeowners would maintain their own properties according to normal city ordinances just like any other neighborhood, and the financial impact on the former board members was severe. The president had to sell her house to pay back the money she owed, and the property management company she owned was bankrupted and went out of business. 2 other board members declared personal bankruptcy, but for the rest of us it was like being released from prison. I got back about 6 feet of my backyard that I didn't even know I was missing, and my neighbor got back the 4 feet he had given up. Other homeowners recovered even more land. One family got back nearly a quarter acre that the board had claimed as common space, and more importantly, we were finally free from the constant harassment and bogus violation notices. No more fees for updated guidelines that were never actually updated. No more charges for maintaining common areas that weren't common. No more threats and intimidation from power-hungry board members. And yeah guys, now my opinion about this story. So I would say the most insane part here is how long they got away with all of this. Like, this was not some small-time scam. They were actually systematically stealing property from dozens of families for years, and nobody thought to actually check if the boundaries, the HOA boundaries, matched the original development plan. It really makes you wonder how many other neighborhoods have similar situations where boards are just making up rules and stealing land because the homeowners assume that they are legitimate. That is what you call a mafia in my book.
And now a comment from Reddit. This one said, "You know you have messed up when your brilliant plan to intimidate a homeowner accidentally triggers the legal equivalent of an archaeological dig that unearths your entire criminal operation. This is like challenging someone to chess and then realizing they've been studying your illegal moves for months." And another user in the comments said the following, "This is why I will never buy a house in an HOA neighborhood. I don't care if the property values are higher or the lawns look nicer. The moment someone starts telling me I cannot plant roses in my own yard is the moment that I'm out." OP basically lived through my worst nightmare, but actually had the backbone to fight back. Most people just bend over and take it because they are afraid of legal costs. And the next one is a malicious compliance story, which is titled, "Have you ever used malicious compliance to deal with ridiculous work rules? How did it turn out?" So for context, I was working in a large manufacturing plant and needed to change a testing procedure. I was the expert and knew exactly what was needed, so I updated the procedure and sent it out with an effective date to start, and management had a fit. "You cannot make this change without input from all the different users. You need to have review meetings to gather input." Okay, so I scheduled a big review meeting and invited over 20 people from different groups and levels of organization, and no one showed up. So then I sent the new procedure back out with a note that stated all those who attended the review meeting agreed with making the changes and implemented the new procedure. Everyone was happy. Multiple managers apologized for missing the meeting, but were really glad that I had taken the time to get everyone's input. And yeah guys, thank you so much for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.